The steel and ceramics industries, and also those, but glass, all the things, the infrastructure things we need to make life happen in the modern 21st century. They use gas-fired furnaces with temperatures that go up to excess of 1,000 degrees Celsius. Well, there's that big emphasis now in it. How can we cut our carbon emissions? And for a sector like that, it's rock hard. So the Teesside-based Minerals Processing Institute, they're taking part in a project looking into improving energy efficiency and how we can get to that target that's been mooted around. By 2035, we should be carbon neutral. This morning, I had a really fascinating conversation with Chris McDonald. He's their chief executive. Have a listen to this.
It's a really big challenge. So when we're talking about, the sector here, we call it the foundation industries. It's like steel, metals, glass, ceramics, all the sort of stuff that everything's made from. And all of these materials, they use these really high temperature furnaces, loads of energy to make the materials. And so they're the most difficult to remove the carbon from. And they're also the most polluting as well in terms of carbon dioxide emissions. So it's a big problem globally to try and come up with some new technologies to enable these industries to decarbonise.
Is this something that has been on the horizon for a long time for those industries, where they knew this was creeping up and this is not a new thing that you're going to have to encounter?
Well, it has, because I've been working in the steel industry for about 20 years now. And even in 2001, I remember there was a big European project trying to look at removing carbon emissions. But the thing is, the ambitions changed. So back then, 20 years ago, we thought if we could reduce carbon emissions by 10% by 2050, then that was going to be really great if we could do that. And now we're saying we're going to be zero carbon by 2030 or 2035. So really the pace of change is what's increased. So we need to come up with all sorts of new ideas for new technologies.
Is it a head scratcher for you? Because the industry that you've spoken about are necessities, really, because without the things that you've just spoken about, we wouldn't have much of infrastructure for today. So how likely is it by 2035 you will be carbon neutral?
So you're right, we can't do without it. I mean, you can't do without steel and cement and glass and all of these things. And it is a head scratcher because in most other industries, like, say, automotive, you can kind of get around it by just switching to electricity. And then as long as you've got green electricity, you can run your motors and your lines and so on. But for these big furnaces that we operate, electricity just isn't an option. And it's not an option because they're so massive. They generally run on gas. And also because this sort of affects the quality as well. So you can imagine if you have a brick kiln and they're not heated correctly and you build a house and the bricks all crack, that's a massive problem. So it's an issue of the scale of the industry, but also, you need to have the sort of quality and surety of these materials as well.
I'm sure that a lot of this is down to investment as well into that technology. Are governments giving you that investment to look at this and so you can create that future that they're demanding from you?
Yeah, well, the investment that's required in this is too big for the industry itself. I mean, I've just come off talking to you from a conference I've been doing in Korea, where there's sort of, 800 people from the global steel industries kind of wrestling with this issue of investment. Fortunately, the UK government has given the Materials Processing Institute £20 million over the next 5 years to work on these problems for the UK industry, which is fantastic, recognising we've got a real centre of excellence in Teesside to work on this. But industry needs to invest alongside that. So we're looking for much funding with industry. But if you look globally, governments around the world are putting tens of millions, hundreds of millions of pounds into solving these problems because they know these industries are so vital for their own economy.
We all have an interest in this, because it affects us all. The materials that you produce as an industry, we use, but also we all fancy that idea, don't we? We like the idea of being carbon neutral by 2035. Do we all have to work in this together and think that we may have to just, chip a few quid in ourselves to get to where we need to be?
Yeah, we do. Because, there's a big challenge to this. Look, the outcome of this is likely to be more expensive materials. We've looked at some scenarios where if we switch to hydrogen, which is like the real buzzword at the moment, instead of using oil, we could see prices of steel go up by, 30, 40, 50%. And the challenge is, if we switch our own industry to this, but we don't put some protection measures in place, then we could be importing dirty, cheap materials from other countries. So, it's something that as a society we have, if we're going to want it and we want our industry to do it, then we'll have to accept that then just buying sort of cheap, dirty stuff from overseas is not going to work either.
And that's the key, isn't it? Because if it's out of sight, it's out of mind. We can do what we do here. We can recycle our, McDonald's cups and we can do our plastic into our bin, but, our steel might be coming from somewhere where it's not so clean. We need to open our eyes wider to this. And I'll put to you, because the thing is, we talk about these insurmountable insurmountable things. If I was to say to you 20 years ago that there would be days where none of our electric was produced by coal, you would have laughed at me.
Yeah, you're right. But, that's another one of these out of sight, out of mind things. We're currently importing now about sort of 20 to 30% of our electricity via interconnectors underneath the North Sea. And we don't really know where a lot of that electricity comes from. So again, we have to be clear about this in the UK. If we're going to decarbonise, that doesn't mean offshoring. It doesn't mean importing electricity or steel or whatever from someone else. If we're going to decarbonise, we need to do it properly. And that means that we will produce clean electricity, clean materials. And if that's a little bit more expensive, and it's a difficult thing to say at the moment, given energy prices, then it's something that we'll have to deal with.
Because there's that thing, isn't there, with carbon credits, where it's like a game of poker, we move it around. Do you think the general public, like myself, I was interested to speak to you today because you clarify things for me and make it really easy for me, that we understand what is meant by carbon neutral by 2035?
Well, I wonder if anyone really understands it, because it is quite complicated, isn't it? And it's important to have an ambition like that. But I don't think anyone really wants to see a fall in their quality of life either. And that's where the innovation bit needs to come in. So we've got to solve the problems whilst at the same time maintaining the same quality of life for people. So for instance, one of the things we've been working on is improving energy efficiency for some of these big furnaces. And it all sounds very complicated. I've got my engineers talking to me about organic Rankine cycles, but essentially it's just like the fridge you've got in your house. If you've got a fridge in your house, it keeps the food cool because it sucks the heat out. If we can do that on big furnaces, then we can increase their energy efficiency, and maybe we can do that in domestic as well. So looking at energy efficiency is a great thing to do, and switching to alternative fuels as well.
We are at a real crux in history here, aren't we? And I can't think of anything more fundamental than maybe it's the Industrial Revolution. We're at one of those points in time. We're living in a strange time.
Yeah, you're right. It's a complete turning point. I mean, our whole society's been built on coal, essentially. The Industrial Revolution was coal, and it was oil. And you look at the UK, a massive exporter of energy for most of our history, and now we're a big importer as well. And we're seeing the impact of that now, aren't we? With energy prices going through the roof. I was thinking I should get my team at work to come and have a look at my central heating system and see if it could save me some money here. But it's I think we all need that. But we've been buffeted around by these challenges, and I think we've got to realise you're absolutely spot on. It's a fundamental change in how our whole economy works, but we've got to keep focused on it, because if we let go of industries like energy or materials and so on, then really we'll lose control of the whole economy then.
And what history does tell us that people like you and your teams are always up for the challenge and will always strive to find a solution.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, the people, who I work with, they get out of bed every day to solve these problems. That's their job. All they need are the tools to do it. And that means we need to invest in research and innovation. That's the way out of this. It's about getting our great, innovators, many of them in industry, not just in universities, but in industry as well, industrial innovators. Get them out, unleash them, give them the tools to get on, develop these technologies and get them out and solve these problems.
And we are centred to that in the North East, aren't we? We've got so much happening here that can help the rest of the world. It is like going back to the Industrial Revolution again. We can help to build the world.
Yeah, we really can. And, I think we saw some of this reliance recently when, the energy prices went up. CF fertilisers, the north of the Tees there, they weren't able to produce. And then we find we can't get sliced chicken in the supermarket, and it's all of these things where, sort of unsung heroes of industry are coming into kind of Billingham and Wilton and so on every single day and doing their job. And it's only when they're not there that you notice that there's a problem. So yeah, we've got the capability to solve these problems, and you're right, the Teesside and actually the wider North East, we're going to be a big part of this.
Yeah, not all superheroes wear capes, as they say, Chris.
Yeah,
and
absolutely right. Yeah.
Don your cape for work today, my friend, and it's always great to speak to you. Take care.
Yeah, you too as well.
See you, Chris. Bye-bye.
Yeah, cheers. Bye-bye. Bye.
A real interesting insight, isn't it? And I think, what does it mean, carbon neutral? And I think Chris could put a bit of context into that and what we're doing in our neck of the woods to try to solve the world's problems. Chris McDonald, Chief Executive of Teesside-based Minerals Processing Institute there, just giving us a bit of an insight.